My phone lit up before the waiter even reached my table. A notification from our shared photo storage. New photos added. Paris, 2026. I opened it. My husband was on a private jet, champagne raised, a woman in a red dress pressed into his side, comfortable and familiar. The caption he had typed beneath the photo read, "Finally free from the dead weight. Our new life starts now." I was sitting at the best table in the most expensive restaurant in the city, wearing the silk dress Malachi had chosen for me that morning. He had promised to be here by 8. He had made the reservation himself, picked out the dress, arranged my spa day. I had spent the afternoon believing he loved me. I understand now that he was making sure I would be out of the house. I did not scream. I did not call him. I did not cry. I set my phone face down on the white linen tablecloth, looked at the single candle on my birthday cupcake, and let it burn for one quiet moment. Then I picked up my credit card and asked the waiter for their finest bottle of champagne to take with me. He looked briefly confused. I did not explain. I walked out into the night air, bottle in hand, and sat in my car in the dark for 60 seconds. That was all the time I allowed myself. Then I started the engine. By the time I reached home, I already knew what I was going to do. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you're not alone. Stories like this happen more often than people think. If you enjoy powerful stories about betrayal, justice, and second chances, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now let me show you what happened next. My name is Sienna. I was 30 years old, the founder and lead developer of a tech company worth millions. And until 60 seconds ago, I had believed I was in a happy marriage. Malachi and I had been together for a decade. He was the face of everything we built, the speeches, the magazine covers, the investor dinners. I was the one who stayed up until 3 in the morning making the company actually work. We had always understood our roles. I thought we had always respected them. The woman on the jet was Sloan Whitmore. He had introduced her 6 months ago as a marketing consultant. I had welcomed her into my home. I had cooked dinner for her, made her coffee, and genuinely liked her. I had spent the evening wondering why my husband was running late. I drove home through empty streets, hands steady on the wheel, mind already moving. The betrayal was real, and it was enormous. But grief would have to wait. I had already seen the photo. I already knew what I was walking back to. The question was not what Malachi had done. The question was what I was going to do about it before he landed in Paris and allowed himself to believe he was untouchable. The city slid past the windows. I did not cry. I did not turn the radio on. I simply drove and thought and arrived at the house that still had my name on it. I had until morning. The bedroom told me everything. His side of the closet was gutted. Not a rushed departure, a planned and thorough removal. Every suit, every watch, every piece of the life we had built together, gone. He had used my spa day, the birthday gift he had arranged for me that afternoon, as a window of time to move out without a scene. I stood in that empty room for a moment and understood the full shape of it. He had not woken up that morning and decided to leave. He had been planning this for a long time. The spa appointment, the dinner reservation, the dress he had chosen, all of it had been logistics, not love. I checked the company card records and found the jet booking from that afternoon. He had used our company's money to fund his own escape. I made 2 decisions standing there. First, I needed someone on the ground in Paris immediately. I sent a short message to the private investigator my company kept on retainer. Need surveillance in Paris tonight. Send your first available contact. A reply came within minutes. It was arranged. Second, I needed to know exactly what had been happening in the months I hadn't been looking. I walked to Malachi's desk, sat down, and opened his laptop. He had never once changed his password. It had been our wedding anniversary since the day we married. It had never occurred to him that I might one day come looking. That arrogance was about to cost him everything. The password worked on the first try. I moved through his files until I found a hidden folder labeled Project Legacy. Inside it, I found everything. Mortgage documents for our house, signed with a forgery of my name. He had secretly borrowed a fortune against our home without my knowledge. And for 8 months, money had been leaving our company in small, steady amounts, flowing into a private account called Devereaux & Associates, a company I had never heard of, never agreed to, and never signed for. That was all I needed to understand. He had not left in a moment of weakness. He had spent the better part of a year building a secret life on top of mine, methodically, patiently, while sitting across from me at dinner and telling me everything was fine. He had left me with a house the bank now owned and a company bled nearly dry. He believed he had left me with nothing. I closed the folder and sat back in his chair for a moment. He had left me with proof. Every transaction, every forged signature, every transfer, documented and stored on a laptop he had not bothered to secure because it had never once occurred to him that I would come looking. That was the thing about Malachi. He had always believed that being the loudest person in the room made him the most powerful one. He had spent 10 years being wrong about that. Tonight was when he would finally find out. I needed to understand who Sloan Whitmore really was. I spent the next 3 hours searching. Every record, every connection, every document I could find. Piece by piece, the picture assembled into something so deliberate it made my hands go cold. Sloan's father was the man who had destroyed my father's life. 20 years ago, he had targeted my father's small engineering firm. He had stolen the patents through legal manipulation, buried the company in lawsuits no small business could survive, and driven my father into bankruptcy. My father had spent the final years of his life crushed under the weight of it. The stress had killed him before he should have gone. I had grown up watching a good, honest man lose everything because someone with more money had decided his work belonged to them. This was never a coincidence. This was never an affair that got complicated. Sloan had come looking for me. She had found Malachi, recognized his ego and his hunger, and offered him a story, a shared legacy, a fortune waiting at the end, a chance to complete what her father had started. She had told him exactly who I was and exactly what it would cost me. Malachi had listened to the full story of my father's destruction, understood what she was asking him to help finish, and said yes without hesitation. He had not been tricked into this. He had chosen it. This was not heartbreak anymore. This was war. And I had been preparing for it my entire life without knowing. The clock hit midnight. My birthday was officially over. I pulled up the flight tracker. Malachi's jet was somewhere over the Atlantic, halfway between here and Paris. He was probably asleep in a leather seat, his shoes off and his conscience quiet, already imagining the version of his life that started when the plane touched down. I thought about Vance. Malachi's former business partner had been forced out of the company 3 years ago on public accusations that followed him for years afterward. The truth I had refused to accept at the time was that Vance had caught Malachi stealing from the business and tried to warn me. I had chosen loyalty over honesty. I had dismissed him and kept showing up for a man who didn't deserve it. Vance had paid for my blindness with his career and his reputation. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It was past midnight. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Sienna, do you know what time it is?" I told him I did. I told him he had been right about Malachi all along. I told him I needed his help. There was a long pause, long enough that I thought he might simply hang up, which he would have had every right to do. Instead, he said, "Tell me where." Some people are simply better than the circumstances they have been handed. Vance was one of them. He met me at a diner 40 minutes later. I spread everything on the table before he could even open the menu. The forged signatures, the missing money, the hidden company, the second mortgage. Vance studied each page in silence, expression shifting from tired to sharp. "He's been thorough," he said, "but sloppy. He always believed he was the smartest person in every room. That belief gets expensive." Everything I had found, Vance confirmed, pointed to federal crimes, not a civil dispute. The company was registered in my name. Every forged document was a criminal act. Then he told me the one thing I hadn't found myself. Malachi's mother was still alive. For years, Malachi had told people she died when he was a child. It was a story that opened doors and softened rooms. The truth was that she was very much alive, a powerful woman living in Switzerland under her family name, Devereaux. She had cut her son off long ago after losing patience with exactly this kind of behavior. Sloan had advised Malachi to use the Devereaux name for the shell company because it carried instant credibility in European banking circles. Doors would open without questions being asked. Using her name without her knowledge, Vance said quietly, was the kind of insult she would never forgive. I wrote down her address. The most dangerous person in this story was no longer Malachi. It was his mother. And she was about to find out what her son had done with her name. We worked through the night. Going to the authorities immediately felt wrong. Malachi had expensive lawyers. A legal fight could take years. I needed every exit sealed before he even knew the doors were closing. The plan was simple in the way that the best plans always are. By the time he sat down to breakfast in Paris, every dollar he had access to would already be frozen. Every card canceled, every account locked. The moment his phone connected to a network in France, a 90-minute clock would start, long enough for them to check in, feel safe, and pour the first glass of champagne. Then everything would stop at once. I wanted the floor to fall when he was most comfortable. I reported the forged signature on the Devereaux account to the bank as identity fraud and sent them the evidence. Every cent in that account, including Sloan's access, was frozen before sunrise. Then I wrote to his mother in Switzerland. I attached the Paris photos, the forged documents, and the proof that her family name was being used in a fraud she had never consented to. Subject line: The truth about your son's project legacy. I closed my laptop. Outside, the city was beginning its slow move toward morning. Somewhere over the ocean, Malachi was dreaming about the life waiting for him when he landed. He had no idea that by the time breakfast was served, it would already be gone. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story so far, take a moment to subscribe and join the community. I share powerful stories like this every day. Stories about betrayal, revenge, and people who refuse to stay broken. At 8 in the morning, Paris time, the tracker updated. His plane had landed. The 90-minute clock began running the moment his phone found a signal. In 90 minutes, the life he had spent a year secretly building on top of mine would be gone. My phone buzzed with a message from Malachi. Hey babe, just touched down for the meetings. Going to be a long day, don't worry if I'm quiet. We'll call tonight, love you. I read it twice. He was standing next to the woman who had helped him steal from me, and he was still sending cover stories out of pure habit. He was keeping me warm in case something went wrong, and he needed a way back. I did not reply. I opened my email and wrote to his mother instead. I told her the truth in plain, careful sentences. What her son had taken, how he had forged my name, and how he had used the Devereaux family name without her knowledge to move stolen money through European banks. I attached the photos from the jet and every document I had found. Then I poured a glass of the champagne I had brought home from the restaurant the night before. The bottle I had ordered to go when I was still in shock, before the shock turned into something harder and more useful. I sat by the window and watched the clock. Somewhere in Paris, Malachi was ordering breakfast, completely certain that everything had gone to plan. They posted the photos themselves. I watched through the hotel's public social media tags as Malachi and Sloan documented their first morning in Paris. A silver breakfast tray, croissants and strawberries, the Eiffel Tower filling the window of their penthouse suite. Malachi had his arm around her waist. He was smiling the way he smiled in magazine photos, easy, performed, the smile of a man who had never once doubted he deserved everything he had. Then the 90 minutes ended. Every company card stopped working at exactly the same moment. Every investor, board member, and employee received the same alert. The CEO was under an emergency financial review for suspected misconduct, and all company accounts were suspended immediately. The change was instant and total. There was no warning and no grace period. I thought about the silver breakfast tray. I thought about Malachi reaching for his wallet with the easy confidence of someone who had never worried about money in his life. I thought about the small, quiet moment when the card came back declined. He would not understand it at first. He would assume it was an error. He would be patient and polite, the way people are when they are certain the problem is on someone else's end. Then he would start making calls. Every call would lead him to another closed door. I had made sure of that. The most beautiful morning of his life had just become the worst day of it. He simply didn't know that yet. I had prepared for his next move. The moment his card stopped working, Malachi would call the bank. I had arranged it so that when he tried, he would hear a recording of his own voice, a clip from a company meeting the year before where he had spoken confidently about the importance of removing dead weight to secure the company's future. I wanted him to understand immediately that this was not a system error. This was me. He called me 10 minutes later. I watched the phone ring and let it go almost to voicemail before I picked up. Sienna, thank God. His voice was loud and poorly controlled, the sound of someone trying to perform calm. Something's gone wrong at the office. All my accounts are locked. The hotel is threatening my luggage. I need you to wire $20,000 to a local account right now. Please. I'll explain everything when I'm home. I let the silence build until it was genuinely uncomfortable, long enough for the first edge of real fear to reach him. Then I said quietly, with no anger in my voice at all, "Happy birthday to me, Malachi." The silence on the other end was complete. In the 10 years we had been together, I had never once spoken to him in that tone. Completely still, completely certain. The voice of someone who already knew how the story ended. He had no response for it. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. "What did you just say?" His voice had dropped. The performance was gone. "I saw the photos," I said. "The jet, the champagne, the caption. And when I got home, I found the forged signatures on the house and 8 months of money that had been quietly moved out of our company." He started talking immediately, fast and layered, the version of a story he had clearly rehearsed. Sloan was a colleague. The photos were misread. The financial changes were a restructuring he had been planning to explain. He had a plan, and things had gotten complicated, but he was going to come home and make it right. While he was still talking, I opened the hotel's billing system on my second screen and sent a quiet message to their accounts department. The reservation was no longer covered by the company. All room charges were to be declined with immediate effect. I waited for him to take a breath. Then I cut in. "You should stop talking and start preparing. Your mother received an email from me this morning. The photos, the forged documents, and the proof that her family name was used in a fraud she had no knowledge of. She is already making arrangements to travel to Paris." A beat of silence. "The hotel has also just been informed that your room is no longer on the company account." I paused once more. "I'd suggest finding somewhere comfortable in the lobby to wait. Have a nice walk, Malachi." I hung up before he could find his voice. I had 72 hours before he could challenge the account freeze. I didn't need anywhere near that long. Every dollar he had stolen was already frozen. Every exit was already sealed. What remained was making sure he could not use the house or the company as weapons against me while the legal process ran its course. Vance and I went to the bank. The forged mortgage signature was enough to freeze the house title entirely. Malachi could not sell it, borrow against it, or use it to fund a legal response. Then we went to the office. The staff were shaken. I walked into the boardroom and stood at the head of the table without apologizing, without softening it, without performing anything other than the truth. Malachi was the face, I told them. I was the foundation. Every product, every system, every piece of work that gave this company its value, I built that. His name is gone now. The work remains. I looked around the room at people who had shown up that morning, not knowing whether the company still existed. If you stay, we rebuild. If you leave, you walk out with a man who is currently being arrested on another continent. Not one person moved toward the door. That moment mattered to me more than I expected. Not because I needed their approval, but because every person in that room had chosen to bet on what I had built. That was worth more than anything Malachi had ever put his name on. In Paris, things collapsed faster than I expected. Sloan had woken up to find her own access to the Devereaux account completely cut off. The fraud freeze had locked everyone out, her included. Every cent she had been counting on was untouchable. The fortune she had helped steal was suddenly unreachable, and she had nothing of her own left to fall back on. I had always wondered what she would do when the money disappeared. My investigator had a local contact following them through the city. He sent me a video. They were standing outside a boutique on a cobbled Paris street. Malachi was talking with his hands, trying to construct an explanation for a situation that had no good explanation. Sloan stood beside him, looking at a necklace in the window. She turned and asked him something. He shook his head. That was apparently enough. She stepped to the curb, raised her hand for a taxi, loaded her bags into the back without a word, and was gone before he could react. No argument. No farewell. No hesitation. She had never loved him. He had been useful, a man with connections, a public profile, and access to a company full of money. The moment those three things vanished, he had nothing left to offer, and she had no reason to stay. Malachi was now alone on a Parisian pavement with no money, no room, no plan, and no one. He had designed this exact situation for me. He simply never imagined it might one day close around him instead. He called me 31 times. I did not answer once. Every dollar he had spent building his new life on top of mine was already being pulled back. The jet charter, canceled. The sports car deposit, recovered. Every company purchase he had made in the past 3 months, traced and reversed. I did not explain the process to anyone. I simply worked through the list and closed each one. By the time the first day was over, the company was stable. He had spent nearly a year quietly moving money out. It took me one day to begin moving it back. I want to be honest about how it felt. Not triumphant. Not yet. It felt like the kind of focused, necessary work you do when there are no alternative and no time to feel anything other than purposeful. Each item recovered was not a victory. It was a correction, a restoration of something that had always been mine. The satisfaction would come later. In this moment, there was only the work, the next item on the list, and the one after that, until the list was finished and every door he had tried to open was permanently closed. Malachi had counted on me being too shocked and too heartbroken to move. He had forgotten who had been running everything all along. By nightfall, every exit he had left was sealed. He had nothing left to negotiate with. Night fell in Paris. My investigator sent me a photo. Malachi was on a bench near the Seine, his expensive coat pulled tight, phone held in both hands like a lifeline. The river moved behind him, quiet and indifferent. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him look. He eventually found a public Wi-Fi connection and sent me a long email. He said things had gotten out of hand, that it was never meant to go this far. That somewhere in the middle of everything he had lost his way, and underneath all of it he still, and here the language became carefully vague, still cared about what we had built together. He asked me to send him money so he could come home and explain. I read it all the way to the end. Then I deleted it. There is a particular kind of dishonesty in an apology that arrives only after everything has already collapsed. Malachi had not stumbled into this. He had planned it over 10 months, in careful steps, while sitting across from me at dinner and telling me he loved me. He was not sorry for what he had done. He was sorry that he was cold and hungry and utterly alone on a park bench while the future he had stolen was completely out of reach. Those are very different kinds of sorry. I closed my laptop, finished the last glass of birthday champagne, and went to bed. Tomorrow was going to matter. The next morning, Malachi's mother arrived in Paris. She had not slept after reading my email. She had booked a flight, called her legal team, and flown through the night. The use of the Devereaux name, her family name, in a fraud running through the very banking circles she personally moved through, was not something she would address at a distance. She had spent decades building a reputation for absolute integrity. Her son had been quietly dismantling it for 8 months without her knowledge. She walked into the hotel lobby with 3 lawyers behind her. Malachi was at the front desk, trying to negotiate access to his luggage. My investigator was in the lobby. He sent me the video. I watched Malachi turn and see his mother. The mother the entire world believed had died when he was a child, standing 20 feet away with her legal team and the expression of a woman who had already decided everything that came next. He looked like a child himself. She crossed the lobby slowly. She did not raise her voice. In front of the entire room, she told him that he was a disgrace to his father's memory, and that she intended to ensure he faced everything the law could provide. Then she stepped to the side. The French police handled the rest. Because the case involved a Swiss citizen, a French bank, and forged American documents, it became an international matter immediately. He was going nowhere. Within hours of the arrest, a technology journalist had the story. By that evening, it was everywhere. The headline read, Tech CEO arrested in Paris while wife exposes year-long fraud. But it was not the article that caught fire. It was a single screenshot. Malachi on the jet, champagne raised, with the caption he had written himself visible beneath the photo. Finally free from the dead weight. Our new life starts now. That image was shared millions of times before midnight. People placed it next to his old press coverage. The magazine profiles, the conference keynotes, the interviews where he spoke about building things with integrity. The contrast was complete, and it was devastating. Every piece of flattering coverage he had accumulated over a decade was reshared within 48 hours with the fraud headline attached to it. His investors released a joint statement distancing themselves from him by name. The peers who had shared stages with him went very quiet, then very publicly vocal in their condemnation. And then Sloan's arrest at JFK landed. She had been taken by federal agents the same day, on her way back from Paris. 2 people. 1 scheme. 2 different continents, caught within hours of each other. The story doubled overnight. Comments across every platform said the same thing in different ways. She had outsmarted both of them. They meant me. For the first time since the night it all began, I allowed myself to sit back, close my eyes, and simply breathe. Sloan had read the room the moment Malachi was taken into custody. She collected what she could carry and boarded a commercial flight to New York, slipping out of France before the prosecutors formally added her name to the case. She believed distance would protect her. She believed the noise of Malachi's arrest would give her enough cover to disappear. She was wrong. Everything she had done was already documented. Every account she had touched, every company she had stolen from, because we were not the only ones. She had been doing this for years, across companies and continents, long before she ever found Malachi. We were 1 entry on a long professional list. I handed it all to the FBI. She stepped off her flight at JFK and walked straight into a line of waiting federal agents. It was over for both of them, on the same day, in 2 different countries, hours apart. The legacy her father had dreamed of building was finally complete. Both he and his daughter would now be remembered as the family that spent 2 generations trying to steal their way to the top and lost everything both times. Every wrong done to my father, his stolen patents, his ruined company, the years taken from him before his time, was being answered for, 1 arrest at a time. I thought about him. I thought about how hard he had worked and how little protection he had been given. I hoped that wherever he was, he could see this. A week passed. The mansion was quieter than it had been in years, and the quiet felt earned. I changed the locks, replaced the security system, and donated every piece of furniture Malachi had chosen. I wanted only the things I had picked myself left in the house. For the first time, every room felt entirely mine. At the office, the quarterly numbers came in stronger than they had been in over a year. Without the ego at the top, decisions moved faster. The people who had always done the real work were now getting the credit for it. The difference was immediate and measurable. Vance returned as Chief Operating Officer. We had already begun designing a new product, a data privacy platform I had been trying to get approved for 2 years, while Malachi steered us toward things that looked better in press releases. Now there was nothing standing in the way. A letter arrived from France, handwritten on plain paper. His handwriting was unmistakable. He wrote that he was suffering, that he finally understood the scale of what he had done, that I was the only person who had ever truly known him, and that I was his only remaining hope. He asked me to pay his legal fees. I read every sentence. Then I fed the letter through the office shredder and watched it come out the other side in narrow strips that meant absolutely nothing. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. That is not cruelty. That is simply honesty. The legal process stretched across many months. I attended every hearing by video link, not because it was required of me, but because I needed Malachi to see my face each time he entered the room. I needed him to see that I was not broken, that I had not crumbled the way he had intended, that the woman he had publicly called dead weight was sitting calmly on the other side of a camera, watching the walls finish closing in. In one session, his lawyer called me vindictive, said I had set a trap. I looked directly into the camera and said, I did not forge his signature. I did not charter a jet on our company's account on my own birthday. I did not spend 10 months secretly emptying our business into hidden accounts. I simply stopped cleaning up his messes. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in a French prison, to be followed by extradition to the United States to face the forgery and fraud charges waiting for him there. The Parisian life he had spent a year constructing lasted less than 48 hours. He had lost the company, the house, the reputation, and finally the carefully maintained fiction of his own character. I had lost 10 years I would never get back. That was more than enough reason to make certain the rest of my life counted for something real. On my 31st birthday, exactly 1 year after the night everything fell apart, I did not go to a restaurant. I threw a party at the mansion. I invited everyone who had stood by me through the worst of it. The employees who had stayed when they could have left, the investors who had trusted my word as reputation, Vance, and the small number of friends who had answered their phones in the middle of the night when I needed them most. We ordered pizza. We put the music on too loud. We danced on the marble floors of the house Malachi had tried to take from me, and we stayed until well past midnight. At some point, Vance appeared with a cupcake and a single candle. I looked around the room at every person who had chosen to stay, and I understood something I could not have seen clearly from inside the chaos. Malachi had not just failed to destroy me. He had stripped away everything that wasn't essential and shown me exactly what was left, and what was left was worth more than anything he had taken. In the weeks after the party, I used a portion of the recovered assets to establish a foundation for women who had been financially erased. Women whose contributions to the businesses and homes and lives they had built had been taken from them by the people who should have protected them. It became the most meaningful thing I had ever put my name on. The final piece came in a package from Switzerland. A small antique key. A handwritten note from Malachi's mother. My son never understood that true wealth is built on honor. You have more honor than he ever will. This is for you. The key opened a safe deposit box. Inside it were my father's original patents, the ones taken from him 20 years ago. I called her to ask how she had come to have them. She explained that the Whitmore family had later attempted the same scheme against a Swiss engineering firm. In investigating them, she had uncovered what they had done to my father's company in America. She had purchased his patents rather than allow that family to profit from another person's life's work, and she had held them ever since, waiting for someone connected to them to surface. My email had been the signal she was waiting for. I held my father's patents and cried. Not from grief, from something that felt like completion. His work had outlasted everything done to erase it. It had come home. Another year passed quietly. New contracts, the foundation's first gala. The simple, profound satisfaction of building something on ground that was entirely mine. My 32nd birthday is tomorrow. I am spending it at home with the people who matter. No performances, no secrets, no empty chairs. Malachi is a footnote now. A small one near the bottom of a long and still growing page. I blew out the candle. For the first time in my life, I had nothing left to wish for. If you stayed with me until the end of this story, thank you. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. The next story is already waiting, and I promise you, you won't see the ending coming.